Hi, welcome back to my channel. My name is Sukaja. If you're new here, thank you for being here. I hope you like the videos that I'm making, and in case you like this one, please do consider subscribing to my channel. Welcome to another installment of Bookish Bulletin videos for the year 2022. I want to thank you for being here. If you've been someone who subscribed to me for the last 2 years that I've been on YouTube, thank you very much. I recently hit 500 followers and I'm looking forward to kind of exchanges we're going to have. I'm definitely looking forward to making more interesting review videos and some vlogs as well. I hope you had a great start to the new year. Here's me wishing you all a very happy new year, and I just want to make this much awaited video and be done with it because it's halfway through January. Without further ado, let's get started at looking at my 2021 favorite books that I read and also some honorable mentions, because it's really hard to make a favorites video. Let's just admit that, because I read about 43 books in last year, and that was the most number of books I've ever read in the last 4 years, ever since I got on Bookstagram. Also, I'm on Bookstagram as Bookish Bulletin, so do consider giving me a follow over there if you want constant reading updates and such. I read a lot of non-fiction last year. I read a lot of memoir. I read one or two short story collections, but mainly fiction, some historic fiction, some gothic fiction. So it was a nice melange of all the things that I love. I don't want to say that I had too many favorites. At the same time, it is really hard picking a list of favorite books, and that's why I have honorable mentions as well. And I don't think there were too many amazing books that changed my life and stuff. It was an okay list, and a lot of books, the moment I finish reading them, I give them a certain rating, but then when I look back a couple of months later, I feel differently about it, and then 6 months on, you feel even more differently about that book. So this is taking into consideration all of those feelings that I've had about these books, and now let us look at the books themselves. I just want to mention that they're not in any particular order, and none of these books are here in this list because they were published last year. These are just books that I ended up reading last year and really liked. Let's get started with the paperbacks and then come to the ebooks that I read. This is the honorable mentions list, and the first one on that is Universal Love by Alexander Weinstein. I have spoken about this book previously, and the reason I enjoyed this is because it's a collection of short stories and they are all very original, and they do talk about future scenario. If you're someone who enjoyed watching Black Mirror episodes like I did, and you are someone who's really curious about how technology can be used to affect human relationships and how it molds human relationships and how we are able to form interpersonal bonds and how this gets affected by technology and ever evolving technology at that. So this is sci-fi collection of short stories, and at the same time they're not too difficult to digest. I know some Black Mirror episodes can be pretty intense, but this is not the case with the book. Do consider giving it a read if you're someone who likes to look at the possibilities of the future and what kind of possible scenarios might exist in the near future. The hairs on my arm started to rise because it did feel like a lot of these things are very possible and we aren't very far from heading there. It's a very thought-provoking book as well, pretty well written, and I'm looking forward to reading more by Alexander Weinstein. The second honorable mention I have here is Frenchman's Creek by Daphne du Maurier. We did a Daphne du Maurier book club last year and we read 5 of her books. Everyone in the book club has read Rebecca before, and this one turned out to be my second favorite in that list of books that we read. So if you're a Daphne du Maurier fan and if you loved Rebecca, I suggest you stop everything and pick up this book because it's an underrated book, clearly, and there's so much going on, there's so many layers to unpack. And the heroine in this book is absolutely stunning. Her name is Donna St. Colombe, and she is a woman who wants to escape from her regular life in London. So she moves away with her 2 children. She moves to Cornwall, and in Cornwall she ends up meeting a pirate, and she goes on this adventure, and it's written in such a believable fashion that you instantly want to be on this boat with Donna. You want to do everything that she's doing, all the questionable things. It's a very forward woman for her age when feminism wasn't really a thing. It's set in the 16th century actually, so we have a very forward figure who's like really into subverting things in society and stuff. So she goes on an adventure with a pirate, and I won't say more, but do pick up this book and give it a shot. We absolutely dissected this book. There were so many things that caught our attention. I have written so many notes about this book. It is so enticing as a plot, and it's written so well. I don't see any loopholes in terms of plot in this book, and the character is absolutely enjoyable to read about. So I highly recommend this. The next book I want to give an honorable mention to, and I know a lot of you will be surprised, is The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller, because I did read Circe and this, but yet even though Circe was layered and dense and more in depth, of an exploration into a character. It was like a memoir of that character. I still sort of gravitate towards this book when I have to pick between the two and see which was more entertaining. I definitely felt The Song of Achilles was a real thoroughly entertaining read, a real page turner. This is about Achilles, the figure in Greek mythology, a man who was a demigod, his life story basically, and also his friend who played a very pivotal role in the war that took place, the conquest of Troy, the city. It's about Patroclus and his relationship with Achilles, and I've spoken about this at length in another video which I'm going to link here, so you can go check that out. The next book I have as an honorable mention, again you won't be surprised, is The Housekeeper and the Professor by Yoko Ogawa. This is my third Yoko Ogawa book, and I really enjoyed this. This is my favorite of her books that I've read, aside from The Memory Police and the other short story collection of hers that I read, which was a little dark. This was thoroughly enjoyable. You can read it in a day. It's a short book. It's about the housekeeper and a professor who kind of live together, and the professor has memory problems. He has very short-term memory, and the housekeeper develops this bond with him and then ends up really being more than a caretaker to him. And it's also about his passion for mathematics and how life becomes more interesting to be lived, even though he is someone who is retired. Because of his love for maths and his passion for maths, he's able to do wonders with his knowledge, and just it's a tribute to mathematics in general. And even if you're someone who doesn't love math, I highly recommend you read this book. Coming to the books that I really enjoyed and would be on my top 5 favorites list, I'm going to go in order right now. I want to talk about how much I enjoyed reading High House by Jesse Greengrass. This is my top 1 favorite for this last year. I really enjoyed this book because I am a huge sucker for disaster films, but this gives me a kick and I really enjoy reading this. Also because it's climate fiction. I haven't read any climate fiction before, but this was such a good introduction to the genre. Like, it brought me out of my place where in my house, and I was able to go on this really unsettling adventure with this group of people who are living in the High House, which is kind of an ark that has been built, and how they kind of have to live for a long time in this ark and kind of make do with the supplies that they have. It's also about familial bonds getting redefined, because in situations that are very traumatic and situations where people's safety is compromised, you end up becoming more closer to people who are just strangers to you. And it's about community, creating community, living in a self-sustaining sort of having that relationship with people, and just taking one day at a time and just surviving. Survival is at the key of this, and I really thought this is very poignant and very timely, because a lot of environmental changes are happening as we speak. Global warming is happening, and in this book we have a flood that takes place, and the way in which it is written, it really does give you goosebumps. I wouldn't say it's scary so much as it is super alarming, and I highly recommend you read this. So this is my top 1 favorite of the year. It's written from multiple perspectives, so we meet characters like Francesca and it's told from her perspective. We meet Caro and we meet her younger brother Polly. We see a child's perspective, we see a teenager's perspective on events that are taking place in this book. So it's really interesting. Highly recommended. Love the writing style. Want to read more from Jesse Greengrass. The next book I have here is a big one. I didn't read too many thick books this year, but I read this one, which was a mammoth. I read Romantic Outlaws by Charlotte Gordon, and surprisingly this was non-fiction. And yes, I'm extremely interested in the lives of the romantic poets, the works of Mary Wollstonecraft, and how much of a force she was to reckon with back in the day in the 18th century. Her first work was a work of feminist writing, so she kind of set the tone for a lot of things that were to follow. So I'm really interested in learning about that, and that's why I picked up this book. And also her daughter and the kind of relationship they had, and how the works of a mother whom the daughter never met in her real life influenced her to such a great extent that she came up with the fantastic novel Frankenstein. Mary Shelley wrote that novel, and all the events that led up to her writing that novel are kind of explained really well in this book. I just really absorbed it. I didn't find it boring at all. Really enjoyed every moment of reading this book, and that's why this is on my favorite list. Surprisingly, every bit of information, even though it was extremely detailed, not everybody would gel with that, but I really enjoyed this book for that. The next book I want to mention is Whereabouts by Jhumpa Lahiri. That was another one of my favorites this year. I think that book has become synonymous with who I am as a person. I thought it was very brave for this writer to write novel in Italian again, and also talk about her life in Italy, and just a very removed book for someone who's writing, who identifies as an Indian and American, and is also someone who embraced the Italian language and Italian culture thoroughly. I just found the sentences in Whereabouts to be absolutely beautiful. It's a very inspiring book for people who want to get into writing and the field of writing, who want to understand writing at a deeper level. From a structural point of view, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the imagery in that. I enjoyed the metaphors. I really appreciated Whereabouts and would highly recommend it. It's very nostalgic. It has some really poignant scenes which are painted, which you might not want to forget in your life because they're so beautiful. So even though they're very mundane, she has a way of weaving magic with her words, making the mundane really amazing. There was an ebook that I read, and I also read Midnight Library by Matt Haig, which I've made a video about where I rant about it for a while, so I'm going to link that here. I just want to say that I really went on a journey and I absolutely enjoyed it. For me, it was a feel-good book, even though it does deal with a person who's on an emotional low and they resort to finding themselves in a magical library when they're about to take their lives. It is a little intense initially, but then it does take you into this parallel universe. It talks about multiverses. It talks about potential scenarios that could take place that might change a person's mind, change a person's decision in at any given moment. It's a beautiful take on human behavior. I think it's a beautiful work of fiction. Highly, highly recommend it. And if you're feeling low at any point, do go read The Midnight Library. I haven't read any of his other books, but would highly recommend this one. So the last book I want to mention is Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. And as someone who's a die-hard historical fiction fan, I absolutely enjoyed and devoured this book. For me, there were no issues with this novel, and it's basically a fictionalization of Shakespeare's wife and her life as it might have played out in the 16th century in England. We do meet her and we meet his son Hamnet, and I thought it was really intelligent the way this novel was crafted and what Maggie O'Farrell was trying to do with all these characters and rewriting a woman's story in general. The story of Shakespeare's wife Anne Hathaway, who nobody really knows much about because there aren't any historical documents available. But then I love when a writer really goes into research and also takes a character from history who is sort of forgotten and she breathes new life into them, and it was executed really, really well. So many things happen in the novel. It really does transport you from your present reality and takes you back in time. You do feel like you are encountering all these characters. Again, it is set during the time of the plague, so that's another interesting thing. There is an element of sickness in the book as well. When I look back at my 2021 reads, the 5 books that I mentioned earlier, including Hamnet, they are really books that stood out to me out of the 43 that I read. So I would highly recommend that you read all 5 of these books and also consider picking up any of the special mentions that I've given to the 4 other books on the list. I would love to hear which were your favorites 2021. Please leave them in the comments down below. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel. That would mean a lot. I will be back with another bookish video soon. In the meantime, stay safe, stay sane. Bye bye.